Cool. So welcome to the new session. This doesn't have anything directly to do with Joomla, by the way. But a lot of people who work on Joomla probably also work on the front end, right? They probably have to deal with HTML, CSS, that kind of stuff. And a lot of people might be also interested in design, right? So I hope this will be quite useful to you. So anyways, before we start, let me just introduce myself. My name is Shwetank. I work for Opera. How many people have used the Opera browser or have downloaded it sometime? Awesome, almost everyone. So yeah, I've been working here for about 8 years now. If you use extensions, browser extensions, I'm the program manager for that. I'm also a web evangelist working in the developer relations team. If you're on Twitter, this is my Twitter over here. And this is my email at the bottom in case you want or have any other questions later on. So before I start, I wanted to ask you a question, right? How many people watched cartoons when they were growing up? Everyone. Okay, so what were your favorite cartoons? Tom and Jerry, right? Anything else? DuckTales. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice. Which ones? Anyone else? Tom and Jerry, DuckTales. My favorite was like Bugs Bunny and the Looney Tunes, Daffy Duck and that kind of stuff. So the reason why I'm asking this question is because you need to understand, and by the way, this question was based or asked to people who were born before 1995, which makes me feel really old because after 1995, there was a lot of computer graphics and stuff happening. So the reason why I wanted to say this is because those cartoons, Tom and Jerry and that kind of stuff, Looney Tunes, they relied on a thing called traditional cell animation. And cell animation was a technique which was a bit revolutionary at that time. It was meant to solve a problem. Before traditional cell animation, what used to happen was animators used to draw each and every frame all the time, each and every aspect of it. So to reduce the burden of it, what people said was, okay, let's make these plastic transparent cells, right? And in each and every animation, what used to happen was there are a few things which are going on. Like there's the main character which is probably moving here and there, right? And that you need to animate. And then there's the background, which is not really moving, right? So in this case, what you do in cell animation is you have just one cell and you paint the background, which isn't moving, right? So you just paint it once. And all the others that actually need animation, you superimpose a cell over there, right? So this is how traditional cell animation used to work. Now the reason why I'm saying or introducing this is because the concept of layers that this has is super duper important to the concept of computer graphics in general, right? And it's really important to know or be familiar with the concept of layers when we're understanding CSS Blend Modes, right? So yeah, so for example, these things over here, these are the moving parts. So you have like different cells for that. If you superimpose it over the background, you'll have something like this, right? So when it comes to modern graphics, now let's forget that. When it comes to modern graphics, you have image editing programs, right? How many people have used Photoshop over here? How many people have used layers within Photoshop? Everyone, right? And you might be noticing these options over there, like screen or multiply or something like this. And if I ask anyone, how does it work? No one really has a clear logical explanation of how does it really work. Everyone just kind of like experiments with it, right? So if you're one of those people, this talk is going to make things a little bit more clear, right? We're going to go deep into at least some of the algorithms involved, some of the functions involved, and remove a little bit of the mystery which surrounds this, right? But before understanding everything, you need to dig a little bit deeper, set the context, maybe even see the history of how things are happening or how things have happened in the past. So when it comes to blend modes, pretty much every movie poster that you see nowadays will use some kind of blending modes. Like for example, this one or any of those over there, right? some kind of blend mode will be applied. It's a very, very basic feature in modern image editing applications, right? Whether it's Photoshop, whether it's Pixelmator, whether it's anything, right? Jim? But now with CSS, you actually have the option to do this for the first time in CSS. Using just CSS, using just code, you don't need to pay for Photoshop, you don't need to pay for anything, you don't need to download anything. You can have such kind of effects in your web pages right now, right? And this is quite powerful. So the spec that the W3C has is called compositing and blending level 1, right? And this enables web developers for the first time to actually have that power, right? So since the spec is called compositing and blending, so before understanding blending, we'll just have a small part on compositing, right? And what exactly is compositing? So compositing is nothing but how to deal with overlapping objects, right? You have one layer over here, you have another layer over here, right? And there's a particular overlapping area, right? So how do you deal with that? That's basically what compositing is, right? And what overall compositing is, it's something called Porter-Duff compositing and blending, which is used in the spec as well, right? So what exactly is Porter-Duff compositing? It's a little bit complicated, but the thing to notice over here is we'll just focus on one particular part, which I'll mention right now. So Porter-Duff compositing was made by these two guys, Thomas Porter and Tom Duff, in a seminal paper in which they discussed the various ways in which they can actually composite images or other things. At that time, they were working in a very iconic company. You might be familiar with it, called LucasArts. How many people have seen Star Wars? Quite a lot, right? So this paper actually came between the time of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So they were actually working quite a lot on various advanced ways of doing computer graphics. And this was one of the seminal papers that they published during this time. Later on, they joined Pixar, at least Tom Porter did, and did a lot of stuff over there as well. So what they basically said was, when you have overlapping objects, right? So in that overlapped portion, there are 4 things that you can do, right? One is both source and destination. So the one on the top is the source, the one on the bottom is the destination, right? So what you can do is you can mix and match elements of both the source and the destination, or you can just show the source, or you can just show the destination, or none. Just have a small blank. Or in other cases, you can have all these different kind of cases of overlapping objects, right? And all of this is fine and great, but the stuff that we are interested in is something called source over, which is the most natural way to deal with overlapping objects, which is you have one piece of paper over here, you have another piece of paper over here. If you look from the top, then the one on the top eclipses the one on the bottom, right? Pretty simple. So this is compositing, basically. The next part is blending, which is what we're really interested in, right? So blending deals with how to deal with overlap portion of 2 objects in terms of colors. So in the overlap portion, you kind of like mix and match colors from the source and the destination portion, and to form a final color, right? And this is what blending is really. And there are various mathematical equations through which you can get different kind of effects, right? And we'll kind of like deal with that. So in other words, you have this layer, right? And on top, another layer comes up, right? It's not completely overlapping it, just a small portion. So in this portion over here, this is what we're interested in. And this is where the magic happens. Some kind of equation, some kind of function is happening, which is mixing and matching both the source and the destination pixels to form a final pixel value, right? So in other words, like this. So in the top is the source, the bottom is the destination, and the one over here is the resulting image, right? So when it comes to blend modes, you have 16 blend modes. The first is called normal, which is like no blend mode is really applied, so it's basically just 15. Yeah, and you can do this in CSS using these properties, mixed blend mode and background blend mode, right? They're pretty important, these 2 things. And we'll take a look at both and how they work. In mixed blend mode, what you do is basically just say mixed blend mode and then the name of the blend mode, right? It can be multiply, it can be screen. For example, in a div, you can just say div, font size, whatever, and then mixed blend mode multiply. So whichever element that div is overlapping, the colors of that div with the underlapping elements are going to be mixed according to, in this case, multiply, right? So demo time. So as I said, when it comes to blend modes, it can be applied to any web page element. It can be an image, it can be a div, it can be anything. So in this case, I made a small demo over here. So as you can see, this is an image over here. Looks pretty nice. But these are actually two different images that I've kind of combined together. When they overlap, I've applied a blend mode, in this case, lighten. I can also do darken, overlay, screen, whatever, right? I can do another one, like let's do this. So in this case, it looks like this image is about a boy who's looking through a window where it's raining, but these are actually two different images, right? One this and the other this. When you combine it, it forms a completely different image in a completely different context, right? And it's pretty fun to play with, these things. So yeah, and what we've done is basically applied mixed blend mode, whatever the blend mode's name is, on the images. That's it. Right. Let's go back. Yeah, live coding time. One of the problems with live coding is that things can go horribly, horribly wrong, right? So, and one of the things which went horribly, horribly wrong with me is my MacBook's Wi-Fi is not working right now. So don't worry. What I've done is, this is a Batman fan site that I have. This is a local instance of it. I wanted to fetch it from the internet, but I don't have Wi-Fi, sorry. So in any case, what you can do with blend modes when you go to a website is just to play with it, just to see what can happen. You can just select an image, for example, over here. You can try to have something. You can just try to play and add a few more blend modes of your own. For example, multiply or screen or difference. So going into the developer tools and actually playing with these are pretty fun. But the problem is that it's quite cumbersome. It's you have to select the element, go into the developer tools, and add a few things over here. If you want to change it, then you have to delete that and all that kind of stuff. So what I did was I made an extension in Opera to do this really, really quickly. So it's called Blend Up. That's the spelling over here. Let's just see. This is the spelling, right? You can just go to addons.opera.com, and over there you can take a look at this extension. And what it does is you can just enter any query selector of your own. Like for example, I enter image, img, and then I can just cycle through different blend modes. And keep in mind, all of these images are, the blend modes are being applied. You can use keyboard shortcuts, the up and down arrows, or tab as well to cycle through all these kind of things. And of course, you can make div or something like this as well. So in a very, very quick manner, you can actually test out how blend modes will look on what particular web page element, right? So if you're interested in this, I encourage you to download this extension. Talking about tools, there's also a tool recently came out by Una Kravitz called CSS Cram. And what it does is it tries to recreate Instagram filters, but in CSS, using CSS filters and blend modes. So you should probably check that out as well. It's pretty interesting. So how many people know about the stacking context in browsers? Oh, one, okay. So when it comes to the stacking context, how many people have used a Z-index in CSS? Everyone, right? So everyone has created a new stacking context in a browser. Think of stacking context as, you know, layers upon layers of web page elements stacked up together, right? And just like over here, you have this. So every time you use a Z index, you create a new stacking context above the other one, right? Every time you use opacity, right, less than 1, you create a new stacking context. Anytime you use transitions, flex item, how many people know about will change? That'll also create a stacking context. And every time you create a blend mode, you create a stacking context as well. It's a new context on top of the previous layer, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because the next property, which is isolation. Now the isolation property isn't fully supported right now in browsers, but it's gonna come. I think it is in Chrome, in Chromium Opera. I'm not sure about Firefox's support for isolation right now. Last time I checked, it wasn't there. But what isolation really is the following. For example, if you have, say, 6 stacking contexts, right? And you want only the first 2 to blend together. You don't want all 6 overlapping stacking contexts to blend together, right? What do? In this case, what you can do is for those 2 stacking contexts, you can wrap them up in a div and say isolation isolate. What will happen is only those 2 within that particular div, those colors will blend together, not the remaining 4 which are underneath, right? So this is straight from the spec. If you have, say, this one, and no stacking context, no isolation is applied, then the colors would also blend in the background, right? But if you have this particular thing wrapped up in a div or anything else, and you say isolation isolate, then only those colors will be multiplied together, not these 2, right? So this is what we mean by isolation. And not a lot of people actually talk about it, but it's actually pretty useful sometimes. This was about mixed blend mode, which is basically, you know, applied to any kind of web page element, whether it's a div, whether it's anything else. Then you also have background blend mode. This is also used quite a lot. So how many people use or have used, say, a background image in a div or whatever? So in this case, what you can do is you can apply a background color as well, and then that image and that color will blend together using background blend mode to form a final effect, right? Do I have a demo of this? Let's see if I do. It's a little bit broken right now, but over here you can see this. This div is basically just using background image, some image, and then background color is this green color, and that's it. It's a very, very simple thing. It's nothing much to explain over here. But the interesting thing is you can use multiple background images, right? How many people have used multiple background images? So what you can do is you can specify individual blend modes for those individual images, respectively. So in this case, sample1.png, the screen blend mode will be applied. And sample2.png, the overlay blend mode will be applied, right? Now, as I said in the beginning of this talk, a lot of people who are really skilled in CSS still don't understand blend modes because it's a little bit like a random thing. Like, I'll just try a whole bunch of them and see which looks nice, right? But they can be categorized and kind of like made sense of. So these are the following categories of blend modes that you can see. The darkening, lightening, contrast, comparative, and component, right? And what we'll do is we'll take one blend mode from each of those categories, and I'll explain in depth how it works so that you'll get a better idea of how these things are actually working, right? So first, we'll take the darkening category. Oh, before this, we'll talk a little bit about RGB notation. So in RGBA or RGB, you generally use 0 to 255 or even percentages, right? But in theory, a lot of times just to make things a little bit easier, you kind of like do between 0 and 1, right? So 80% might be 0.8, something like this, right? So keep in mind this mathematical notation when we're discussing all these theoretical things, right? So when it comes to the multiply blend mode, this is the following function, right? And what exactly is happening over here is, CB is the backdrop color, CS is the source color, which is on top, right? And keep in mind these colors are between 0 and 1. Now, when you multiply something which is between 0 and 1, 0 point something, by another value which is also 0 point something, then you get a value which is lower than either of those two, right? So you multiply, say, 0.5 by 0.5, you get 0.25, which is lower than 0.5, right? The lower the value, the darker it is. The higher, the closer to 1 it is, the lighter it is, right? So in this case, what's happening is it's multiplying the source and the color values, and ultimately what you're getting is a final color value which is a little bit darker than either of those two, right? So that's why it's in the darkening category, multiply. It's one of the most used blend modes and one of the most, it's kind of like almost the default blend mode that many people go to. They try this one the first, right? So this was the darkening category. Screen is exactly the opposite. So over here, you take the complement of the source color, the complement of the background color, and then take that complement as well. And then you come up with this thing. So ultimately what happens is, it's almost like the inverse of multiply. It kind of like creates a more value which is closer to 1 and creates a more washed out kind of a look, right? More lightened kind of an effect. The third is the contrast category that we have. And over here, we'll take the example of hard light, right? This is quite interesting. See what it's doing. It says if CS is less than 0.5, apply multiply, else apply screen. So it'll take the value, the luminance value of the source color, right? If it's dark, it's going to make it darker using multiply. If it's light, which is between 0.5 and 1, then an apply screen, which is lighter. So it's making dark things darker, making light things lighter. In effect, it's playing up the contrast. It's almost like if you have a big bright light shining upon you, like a stage light or something, things appear a little bit more washed out. The darks appear a little bit more dark. The things which are light appear a little bit more washed out and more bright. So this is kind of like the effect that you have. So it makes dark things darker, light things lighter. And then comes difference. This is in the comparative category. This is nothing but an inverse. That's it. It's basically almost like a negative of the image, right? Just like a photo negative that you have. It's pretty much the same thing. It basically just inverses basically both the values. It subtracts the background color with the source color, and that's it. The interesting point, though, is that if the background color is 0, what happens? If you subtract anything from 0, it's still the same color, right? But if you subtract 0 point something minus 1, then it becomes the inverse of it, right? So that's why the whole photo negative effect comes in. And then you have the component category, hue, saturation, lightness. And what happens over here is this category is a little bit special. Over here, the RGB values are converted into HSL values. And an operation happens on the hue, the saturation, the lightness, and stuff like this. And then once again, it's converted back to RGB, right? So in hue, it creates a color with the hue of the source color and the saturation and luminosity of the background color, right? It takes one element from, say, hue or saturation or lightness from the source and the rest from the background to create the final pixel value, right? So hopefully, this is gonna kind of like make things a little bit more clear on how things are actually working with blend modes, right? Probably get more of an idea of how things are happening, right? And if you can, in the spec, all of these equations, all of these functions are listed. So you can just kind of like look at it and kind of like make sense of it. Even if you don't, have by heart all of these equations, you can just go to the spec and see. So yeah, one more thing with blend modes, as I said, it's CSS. So you have the full power of the web, which also means that you can combine it with different web technologies, right? Now things are a little bit more interesting. For example, you can use a normal radial gradient, or any kind of gradient actually, and you can superimpose an image and apply a blend mode to create an effect like this. If you wanted an effect like this in a web page, you had to use Photoshop previously, Now you can do this using just radial gradients and yeah, blend modes. Masks, animations, and filters. You can also do and combine effects with this. For example, I made a small demo over here. So as you can see, this is the mask. A mask is always at the highest level of the stacking context, any CSS mask, right? So this mask I've animated using CSS animations. If I hover over this, you'll see that I've applied a blend mode to the text as well. And that text, the blend mode is applying to all of the categories or all of the layers underneath, right? And this is the difference blend mode, you might notice, because it's almost like a negative, right? So it's pretty nice. So in this demo, all I did was I just had these three things. Literally, that's the only thing in the page. These three images, that's it. The rest is CSS. And you can create something which is actually pretty nice. So yeah, using animations, mask transitions, that kind of stuff, it's pretty nice. What's also interesting is that you can apply blend modes to not just static images, but also moving images like animated GIFs. So in this case, you have this animated GIF over here, and you have this animated GIF of Snoop Dogg over here, and you have this 3-line code over here. And what you can do is you can create something like this. Now, if you showed this to someone else before showing the source images, that person would probably believe that this is one single GIF, right? But it's actually two different things, and just 3 lines of CSS, you've made something which is actually pretty cool. If nothing, just for Snoop Dogg. So yeah, that's pretty nice. Now I wanted to use the Facebook meme, like what's really cool, but I won't. The thing is, animated GIFs is fine, that's great. And the question is, can you do this with videos as well? And the answer is yes. And videos are cool, but you know what's really cool? Real-time video. So can you do this in real time with video? And the answer is actually yes. So I made a small demo of this as well. So how many people are familiar with Get User Media? Access to the camera like this, right? So this is real time. And in this case, I've used a CSS shape, but you can use border radius as well to make it a circle or round edge or whatever. You can flip it out. And what you can do is, of course, use these filters, but we're not going to be focusing on filters. We're going to use these blend modes to apply these and make effects in real time in video. As you can see, this is me. So yeah, you can do that kind of stuff in real-time video as well. Basically, any kind of web page element. Right? Blend modes are also there in Canvas, by the way. It's called the global composite operation, right? And you can also specify, in Canvas, you can also specify the composite operation. In blend mode, it's always source over. Yeah, in blend mode, the default composing, the default is always source over as in CSS, but you can also apply your own composite operation over there. Yeah, this is how you do it. This is just standard way to get the canvas, the context, and then you can just say context.global composite operation is equal to screen, and that's it. So you can do this even in Canvas. And you can go further. You can also do this in SVG. How many people have used SVG? So actually, blend modes came from SVG. They were there first. So you can use something called FE image, FE blend to have these properties in SVG as well. Or you can just use CSS in SVG, right? So in this case, you can just say style rect mix blend mode multiply, and that's it. The rect element will have the multiply blend mode applied to it, right? So you can just use either FE image or FE blend, or you can use CSS. Browser support. Chrome, Firefox, Opera, they do support blend modes. When it comes to Safari, it's a little bit more tricky. Safari supports most categories of blend modes, but not all of them. Remember the non-separable blend modes that I talked about, the ones which had to be converted to HSL, right, and then back to RGB. Those ones are not supported in Safari right now. I'm not sure when they are going to be supported, if ever. But in my experience, not a lot of people use that category of blend modes anyways. So yeah, you should be covered. When it comes to IE, it's a little bit different. IE does not support blend modes. My feeling is that Edge will support blend modes. When it comes to compositing, at least they are. And I think Adobe has also contributed to the Edge project, the Spartan project, as it was called at that time. So it should be arriving in Edge, but if it doesn't, then don't shoot me. I don't know. I'm not a Microsoft guy, so I don't know. But in my opinion, it should arrive sometime in the future. Feature detection. This is something which is interesting. You can, of course, use CSS add supports, and you can do the same thing in JavaScript as well. If CSS Windows supports in Windows CSS, do this. This is using Modernizer, by the way. Where is it? Here. You can use Modernizer to, using the test prop functionality, you can just see whether mixed blend mode or background blend mode is applied. You can also use CSS add supports over here. You can say add supports mixed blend mode screen, for example. If it's supported, then do this. So this takes care of browser support as well. So as a recap, this is what we all learned. We learned what compositing is, what blending is, what categorizes, what categories blend modes are, different notations for RGB, the algorithms of some major blend modes, what mixed blend mode is, what background blend mode is, what the stacking context is, what isolation is, blend modes with mask, animated GIFs, real-time video, browser support as well. And you also got a kick-ass animation of GIF with Snoop Dogg dancing like this. So, and if you're more Indian focused, then of course we have Sunny Paji over here. So yeah, with this, I think I'm gonna end. This is further reading, by the way. This is the spec. This is an article written by me on DevOpera, getting to know CSS Blend Modes, in which I talk a lot about the same things, but not, it's detailed, but not as detailed as this talk. There's also an article by Sarah Sweden. You should follow. It's a great article about compositing and blending in CSS that you should check out as well. With that, I'll say cheers. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm available. Yep.
Responsiveness in blend modes, resizing.
Well, but in responsive design, you can of course have different media queries, and depending on the media queries, you can have different blend modes applied to it. So that's
It will work.
yeah, it can work. Yeah. Anyone else? Well, yeah.
Would a blend mode work without using media queries? For example, GIF images, they don't work in mobile devices. So those blend modes, if you want to do media queries, still will work. Mobile.
Yeah, using media queries, it will work. Yes.
Without using media queries.
Without using media queries, of course. Yeah. It doesn't depend on media queries. If you want to use media queries, of course you can, but it doesn't really depend on it. The one thing on mobile is the fact that since it uses the GPU and stuff, if you're trying to do this on real-time video, it's probably not a good idea to do this on mobile. Of course, because of performance reasons. But apart from that, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, good. If you have any more questions, of course, I'm here, and you can talk to me offline as well. So yeah, cheers, thanks.